welcome all. My name is Nick Napolitano. I'm the Assistant for Justice and Ecology for the USA East Province of the Jesuits. And I'm really happy to be with you here today. And I would just love to give a shout out to specifically the folks from our Jesuit parishes on the East Coast, many of whom I've had opportunities to visit over my 10 years in this role. So a lot of familiar faces on the call, which is great to see. But I also am happy to welcome everyone who's joined us today. Many people from diocesan offices, parishes across the country, both Jesuit and Catholic otherwise. For people who are new to the series, and I would put those folks in a category of here to bask in the wisdom of Tom Ulrich, which is perfectly legitimate reason to be here. I wanted to just put this series into a little bit of context. This Parish Racial Justice Series is organized jointly by the Jesuit Provincial Assistance for Justice and Ecology, by the Provincial Assistance for Parishes in the Jesuit provinces, and by the Ignatian Solidarity Network. We began these virtual convenings in July of 2020 as a way to further our racial justice journeys during the pandemic and in another moment in the US of crisis around race and racism in our country. We now try to offer online spaces for spiritual and intellectual growth, conversation, and networking every other month. And you can find out more info about ISN's Parish Justice programming on their website, which AJ will be kind enough to drop into the chat. There's an opportunity through that to be able to sign up for updates from ISN for all of their parish-related programming. Over the past several months, it's been a real pleasure for me to work with Tom Ulrich to develop this session focused on the church's teachings on social sin and social change. And I'm grateful to have an opportunity to introduce him today. Now, unlike some people in the Jesuit world, I recognize that Tom's life of service to the faith justice mission of our church began long before he started working with the Jesuits directly. Just take a moment and think about all of the national entities of our Catholic Church that are charged with the mission of building God's kingdom here on earth. Organizations like Catholic Charities, CCHD, Catholic Relief Services, diocesan offices. And now imagine one person contributing to the work of all of them over their professional career, and you'll have a fairly accurate picture of the experience Tom brings to our conversation today. I won't say Tom saved the best for last when he spent the last several years of his full-time work as a vice president with the Ignatian Volunteer Corps, but I will say how grateful I am for the opportunity to partner with him closely during those years, when he was developing new IVC regions and supporting regional directors through the IVC National Office. In past trainings, I would often joke that Tom wrote the book on parish social ministries because he literally did. That was the title of his first book. His second book, on Earth as It Is in Heaven, is an equally valuable resource to the people of God carrying out the work of God through personal and parish-based work for justice. And we'll be sending out a flyer after the call with some information about that book, but it's also available on Amazon. And I'm certain that AJ and Brenna have that link, which they can drop into the chat. So perhaps you would like to go into the Zoom reactions and throw up an icon or put a greeting to Tom in the chat, but I hope you can join me in welcoming our facilitator today, Tom Ulrich.
Nick, thank you very much for just sharing with everybody, first, that I'm old and been around for a long time, and secondly, that I couldn't hold the job throughout my career. I had to work with in all those organizations. So I really do appreciate you sharing that information with folks. Actually, I want to say first and foremost, thank you. I want to say thank you to you all for giving me this opportunity to reconnect with the network. Nick mentioned that I worked for IVC, the Ignatian Volunteer Corps, for 8 years. And I got Jesuitized during that time, and did spend those 8 years in and out of this network. And it was always a delight. And after my semi-retirement a couple of years ago, and then the lockdown around COVID, I kind of got disconnected with everything, and now I'm back, and for better or for worse. And I do want to say thank you for giving me this opportunity. Special thank you to the ISN folks for actually inviting me, and then finally a very special shout out to Nick. I have gotten to know him. I'm happy to say we're friends, and it's great. And he has kindly, as in that those conversations that we were having, that he alluded to, uh, I had made it clear, and he already knew this, so I was just emphasizing that technology and our relationship is tension filled, if I can just say that. And, and Nick kindly agreed to take care of the technology part of this. So if I mess up, no matter for what reason, I'm blaming Nick for all of it. So anyway, it is a delight to be here. So thank you very much. Let's go ahead and talk about. Let me share with you what we're going to do over the next hour and 15 minutes or so. And if I could get the first slide up, that'd be great. Excellent. What we're going to do is answer the question that that is posed there, and that is the question: is social change authentic church teaching and an essential ministry in faith communities? And before I talk about how we're going to deal with that question, I want to give you a little bit of a backstory on it. Nick already mentioned that he and I talked before this and decided on this, basically on this topic. And one of the reasons that we quickly came to this topic was that we both agreed that talking about racial justice and equity, you can't talk about that without actually talking about uh, the root of that issue, and that is around social sin. And then to further affirm that decision, one of the things we also agreed to is that there's still a lot of skepticism out there in the field, and when I say the field, I would say the parish people in particular, not so much the leaders, but the parish people, about whether or not social sin and social change, particularly social change, is in fact something that the church teaches. And in fact, I can say, based on my own experience, just before the lockdown, I was doing a series of workshops for a diocese on parasocial ministry. And when I got to the part where we were talking about the full vision of social ministry in a parish, which I always describe as having three parts: direct service, formation, and social change ministry. Well, when I said the social change ministry, someone raised their hand and just said, is social change really a teaching of the church? Because that just seems political to me, and we're not supposed to be involved in politics. And of course, I had an answer for that, but it did underscore the fact that even after all of these years that we've been doing this work, this ministry, there is still skepticism around that part of the full mission of social ministry. So we felt like it was a good thing to backfill in terms of this series that you all have been doing over the past year. And so the objective here is to do that backfill. around the question, is social change authentic church teaching and essential ministry in a faith community? And we will go through really a journey, a section journey. And by that, I mean, we're gonna approach this by taking that question and journeying through different elements of an answer to that question, so that by the end, all those sections that we will cover will end up answering the question, and then relate to the theme of this series. So those sections that I'm going to hopefully guide you through today is we're going to start with the first section, which is our call to holiness, and I teach that is actually the anchor to social ministry, and we're going to use Pope Francis's exhortation on the call to holiness as a guide to be the anchor point. And then from there, that will lead us into the second section, and that is on Catholic social teaching. And that will be a refresher course for most of you. But over time, I have learned that you can't refresh yourself enough in the principles of Catholic social teaching. And so we will spend some time doing that. But I'm going to put a little bit of a spin on that, because I am also going to claim that when we talk about Catholic social teaching and the principles, that actually what we're doing is committing ourselves to a series of beliefs that we strongly hold. And so I'm going to talk about it and give you all a chance to do some reflection on Catholic social teaching as a set of beliefs. And then from there, that will lead us into naturally, it will lead us into social sin and a definition of that, and to come directly at the question of, is it authentic teaching? And then of course, we can't really talk about social sin without talking about the reconciliation of social sin. So we will be doing that as the fourth section, and then the final section that we'll cover is we'll come full circle, answer the question, and relate all of what we unlocked beforehand to the theme of racial justice and equity. Now, I hope that makes sense. And I will also say that my intention here is to make this somewhat of a retreat-like experience. And by that, I mean, we're not going to have enough time to do a lot of sharing. There will be a time, I will open it up for some questions about halfway through. But I am going to pause at several moments during the course of this section journey and give you a chance to reflect, and also do a little bit of journaling. That will, I'm not going to give you a lot of time, a couple minutes each time, only in the interest of time. But that is, but that's the kind. I'm going to give you a little bit of chance to process and reflect. So I'm calling that a retreat-like journey that we're going to be taking. So that's the deal. That's what we're going to be doing. Again, I hope it makes sense. If it doesn't, then you can just prepare yourself for a nap for an hour and a half in the afternoon, which I'm learning is a great thing now that I'm semi-retired. So I'm highly encouraging it. So if it doesn't make sense, take a nap is my advice to you. All right, let's go ahead and launch into this this first section, which is anchoring ourselves into the call to holiness. And what I'd like to do is approach this again in the spirit of a retreat, and use this section of today's time together to serve as not only our anchor point, but also our call to prayer. And so I'm going to, and we're going to approach this this part as a way to share some quotes from Pope Francis's exhortation on the call to holiness, and in doing that, we want to also use this as our gathering prayer. if we can do that. So and what we're going to do, I'm going to invite you to do is we're going to proclaim these words. We have two people who have volunteered to read these quotes, and so you can just listen to them in the spirit of the prayer, or if you want to follow along with them. And then when we're finished with that, I'm going to give you this. That'll be one of our times to pause for some reflection. So with that in mind, let's settle ourselves and settle our hearts and our minds in the spirit of prayer. And in this moment of settling, we'll ask the Holy Spirit to open our hearts and mind to the words that we're about to hear, but also to the experience that we're about to have. And as we open our hearts and our minds, let us become more and more aware of the presence of our loving, merciful, and joy-filled God in all things, but especially in this time together. Jean, I believe hopefully you're on, and you are going to do the first proclamation of Pope Francis's call to holiness. If you would
I
do
am.
that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My modest goal is to repropose the call to holiness in a practical way for our own time, with all its risks, challenges, and opportunities. For the Lord has chosen each one of us to be holy and blameless before Him in love. We cannot forget that the ultimate criterion on which our lives will be judged is what we have done for others. Our worship becomes pleasing to God when we devote ourselves to living generously and allow God's gift, granted in prayer, to be shown in our concern for our brothers and sisters. Jesus explained with great simplicity what it means to be holy when he gave us the Beatitudes. In the Beatitudes, we find a portrait of the Master, which we are called to reflect in our daily lives. The word happy or blessed thus becomes a synonym for holy. It expresses the fact that those faithful to God and His word, by their self-giving, gain true happiness.
And Tony, when you're ready.
Okay, I think I'm gonna hop in actually, Tom. I don't know that Tony is here.
Okay.
Holiness then is not about swooning in mystic rapture. The text of Matthew 25, 35 to 36 is not a simple invitation to charity. It is a page of Christology which sheds a ray of light on the mystery of Christ. In this call to recognize Him in the poor and the suffering, we see revealed the very heart of Christ, His deepest feelings and choices, which every saint seeks to imitate. For the Christian, this involves a constant and healthy unease. Even if helping one person alone could justify all our efforts, it would not be enough. The bishops of Canada made this clear when they noted, for example, that the biblical understanding of the Jubilee year was about more than simply performing certain good works. It also meant seeking social change. Even these uncompromising demands of Jesus, It is my duty to ask Christians to acknowledge and accept them in a spirit of genuine openness. In other words, without any ifs or buts that could lessen their force. Our Lord made it very clear that holiness cannot be understood or lie apart of these demands, for mercy is the beating heart of the gospel. Accepting daily the path of the gospel, even though it may cause us problems, that is holiness.
I invite you all to take a few minutes here, and I literally mean a few minutes, to reflect on these words. And as you reflect on them, to just jot down what resonates with you, but also what you are taking away from these words as those words relate to your ministry, particularly the ministry of social change. So take a few minutes, jot down what you're taking away from that, and reflect on it. I'm going to call us back in, and ordinarily in sessions that I would do, I would invite people to share with each other, with us, with the group, what resonated with them and what they're taking away from these words as it's related to our social justice ministry, particularly the social change element to it. But we don't have the time to do that, so I'm just going to share with you all, what I take away from actually the whole exhortation that Pope Francis has gifted us with. So if we'll go to the next slide. These are my takeaways. There are three, and actually a fourth one that is not directly in these quotes, but are implied. And the first takeaway that I have is that, and heard stir in my heart, is that if you claim to be a follower of Christ, of Jesus Christ, then and you say, I'm a Christian. When someone asks you what party you represent, and your answer is, I'm a Christian, what you are doing is you're agreeing to a call to holiness. The second takeaway that I have, that I come away with, is that as I heard, and it really resonated with me, is that holiness is actually the living out of the Beatitudes. And then related to that, the heart of the Beatitudes is the great commandment, is God's great commandment of us. It's the only commandment that he really has, according to Jesus. It's the only, it's the summation of all of the callings of Scripture, and that is to love God with every ounce of our being, and to do that by loving each other. And we love each other to do that both at a personal level, but also to do that at a social level. And that the way that we are guided to keep this great commandment is through the principles of Catholic social teaching and the beliefs that are embedded in those principles of Catholic social teaching. So Catholic social teaching becomes an essential part of our call to holiness. And so the question is, okay, what are the principles of Catholic social teaching? What is that guide? So, and there you have it. Now I want to do a side note here that has nothing to do with this session, but it was fun. if those of you who know me, you know that my MO is for my PowerPoints to actually be handmade charts. And so when I told my 16-year-old granddaughter that I was making created a slide presentation, a PowerPoint presentation for this session, she was excited and she said, "Way to go, Grandpa, that's great." And I told her, I said, "Well, you have to know that 3 of the slides are going to be pictures of charts, my hand charts that I usually make." And Zora paused for maybe a nanosecond. And she said, "Well, that's great too, Grandpa. It's really nice to know that you are transitioning slowly into the 21st century." So, so, so the slide before this slide and the next slide are dedicated to my granddaughter, Zora, and also a recognition that I am soon to enter into the 21st century, probably screaming and kicking. But in any case, back to our session then. What is Catholic social teaching? Catholic social teaching, as you all know, basically are captured in a set of principles, and our bishops have identified those principles as being 7 of them. I am not at this point going to go through each of those principles. I'm going to give us that opportunity in just a couple of minutes, but only in the form of a creed. So I'm not going to go through all 7 of these. But what I would like to do is highlight, throw a beam of light on the core principle of Catholic social teaching, and that principle is actually a belief, and it's a strongly held belief, and that belief is that our loving God, our wondrous God, loves us unconditionally, without limits. And out of that love for us, God made us in God's image. And because we are made in God's image, our lives, human life is sacred. And because our human life is sacred, that means that everybody deserves to have full dignity and also has a right to full dignity. And that's both reflected in our personal lives and also in the society that we construct around us, that we have a right to full dignity, and that our society that we construct should enhance the fullness of our dignity. And that's what Catholic social teaching, those are the principles of Catholic social teaching. What I'd like to ask you to do now is just take, again, in the spirit of retreat, to reflect on your own experience of Catholic social teaching and these principles, and particularly the beliefs that are in these principles, and as they relate to your ministry. What do they mean to you in your social ministry? And as you are getting in touch with that meaning of Catholic social teaching for you, try to capture, I'm going to ask you to capture that meaning and your feeling about that meaning with one word. So take a few minutes, like 2, and have your heart open and let the Holy Spirit tell you what that word is as it relates to the meaning of this in your ministry. Okay, you got your word. Keep it to yourself, at least for now. What I'm going to do again is I'm going to share with you my word. What for me, what does Catholic social teaching mean to me? And if we could get the next slide. My word is roadmap. The reason I use that roadmap is because Catholic social teaching to me is a roadmap that guides us first to a vision of the world as it should be. It's a vision of the world that God has for us and expects us to build, because we are keeping God's command to love God by loving each other. And there's a vision that captures that love of each other. And and Catholic social teaching is a guide to that vision. The second thing that this roadmap leads us to, I believe, is to a moral framework. And it's a moral framework that enables us to make decisions, both personal decisions and also decisions that have to do with building our society around us. And then the third thing that Catholic social teaching means to me and is a guide to is a blueprint. And it's a blueprint for actually building a just and loving and peaceful world. And so those are the three things that capture the roadmap idea for me: a vision, a moral framework, and a blueprint that both is active to the extent that we act on Catholic social teaching. It is active in our lives at a personal level and also at a social level. I also find it pretty interesting, and I'm not sure many people really are aware of this. Maybe they are in their hearts, but I'm not sure. And that is that every time we say the Lord's Prayer, what we are actually doing is making a commitment to the beliefs of that are embedded in Catholic social teaching. The opening of our Lord's Prayer is actually a commitment that we're making. If you just listen to that opening, I hope you will see what I'm talking about. And I'll recite that to you. Our Father, our Mother, you are in heaven, hallowed and holy is your name. Your kingdom will come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That earth as it is in heaven is the vision, and Catholic social teaching is the guide to building that vision, both at a personal level and also at a societal level. Now, I have claimed up to this point that Catholic social teaching is a set of principles, but it's also a set of beliefs that are firmly held that we firmly hold. And I would say that the principles are actually concepts for our heads, and the beliefs are concepts for our heart. They are the same, but they are come at from two different directions. One is from our head, and the set of beliefs come from our hearts. And what I'd like to ask you to do is take a few minutes here, and I'd like you to read this creed, this Catholic social teaching creed. And while you're doing that, know that I'm going to give you a 3-minute reflection test. I'm going to give you 3 minutes to reflect and to answer this question. And the test question is, what beliefs that you are reading directly relate to the ministry of social change? Okay, so read the creed, and as you're reading the creed, see which of these these beliefs that you're going to be reading relate directly to the ministry of social change. So go ahead and do that if you would. Okay. I saw in one person's, and I didn't catch the name, one person's comment that they all relate to social change. And that was, of course, the trick question. Yes, they all relate to social change. At the same time, there is actually one belief that's in one of the principles of Catholic social teaching that is actually welded to the ministry of social change and also social sin, and that is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th belief that's on the sheet, and that belief is goes like this: we believe that everyone has a right to all that is necessary to experience full human dignity. If anything gets in the way of or is a roadblock to full dignity, including sinful social structures, those things must be reconciled through personal and social change. So the answer to the question is, of course, everything is related, but there is a specific teaching that is captured in Catholic social teaching that calls us to the ministry of. First of all, it recognizes the reality of sinful structures in our society, and it calls us to engage in the ministry of social change. So the question then becomes, okay, if social change is a ministry and it is a way to reconcile social sin, what exactly is social sin? And that will be the next slide. Okay. And let me give you the backstory on this that you all likely know, but I'll just remind us. And that is that back in the early 80s, a synod was held, and of course of all the bishops and cardinals. At the synod, the theme of the synod was on reconciliation and penance. And at the time, they, as I understand it, this is, I'm getting my information from someone who actually participated in this. And at the time, there was a lot of conversation, as you can rightly guess, on personal sin. And it was the Latin American bishops who brought to the floor, to the table, the notion of social sin. And as I understand it, there was a really good conversation about that. And a decision was made that the documents that would come out of that synod would reflect both personal sin and social sin. And in that document that is in the name of Pope John Paul II, this definition came out. And that in the definition that we have, as you can see there, and you can follow along with me as I read the first part, and then I'm going to ask you to read the second, those asterisk elements. And then I want to say something about the social sin, the reality of social sin. And in social sin, according to this document on reconciliation and penance, is defined thusly: the presence of social sin in policies, laws, and social practices results in the failure to respect or enhance the human dignity of certain groups within society. Social sin is the accumulation of personal sins. Those personal sins include the following. And let me go ahead and just read them out. They include actions and omissions or omissions that cause or support evil conditions. Actions and or omissions that exploit the evil conditions. Failures to avoid, eliminate, or at least limit the evil condition due to laziness, fear, indifference, the conspiracy of silence, or through secret complicity. It also includes taking refuge in the impossibility of changing the evil condition or the evil structure. Next, sidestepping the effort and sacrifice required to address the evil condition. It also includes rationalizing why one cannot engage in actions to address the evil conditions. And finally, the real responsibility for social sin lies with individuals. And when I read that, it's very interesting to me, particularly given today's political and even I think religious environment, that first of all, our church teaches that social structures can be sinful. And it also is saying several things in identifying social sin. And one of the things it's saying is and the first thing it's saying is that social sin does exist, that structures can be sinful. It's also saying that you can't wiggle out of that reality, that as human beings who are attempting to obey God's great commandment to love each other, both at a personal level and at a social level, we can't wiggle out of our responsibility for that. And that if you are engaged in social structures that are sinful, then you are actually have a responsibility for that. They do not talk about, the bishops do not talk about having committed the social sin, but the bishops are very clear that if you are engaged in a structure that is sinful, then you have a responsibility to reconcile that, and that you can't get out of it by one, denying it. You can't get out of it by avoiding it. You can't get out of it because of laziness or indifference, or you can't get out of it because you think it's overwhelming and it's not possible to reconcile. Like, for example, racism. It's overwhelming. We can't really do anything about that. So the bishops are very clear that when we are talking about social sin, that we all have a responsibility to do something about that. So with that in mind, I'm going to pause now for a second, and I'm going to open the floor for comments and questions if you have it. I'm not going to manage that, thank God. I think Nick and something magical is going to happen that I'm not involved in. But before we do that, I'm going to do a real quick recap of the journey, the sections of the journey that we've gone through. We started off with an anchor point, and that is our call to holiness, that if we call ourselves followers of Christ, then we are called to holiness. And that we from there, our journey led us to the fact that that holiness, if it has to be, our holiness is guided by Catholic social teaching. And that Catholic social teaching is both a set of principles and also a set of beliefs that we firmly hold. And it's by acting on that we keep God's great command to love each other, and also to build a just and a society that reflects our call to holiness. And then the final section of the journey that we have been on has led us to the reality of social sin and how difficult it is to deny that reality, and also that we're all called to take responsibility for it, and also to be a part of the reconciliation of social sin. That's been our journey up to this point. And so let me pause and see if people want to wade in at this point with either comments or questions.
So again, a reminder, inviting folks to raise their hand, and that'll be a way that we can see you and unmute you. I think you can raise your hands while the screen share is on. Brenna, can you confirm that? My screen looks a little bit different because I'm doing the sharing. Great. But Tom, in the meanwhile, while other questions are coming through, one of our members is asking about subsidiarity. Sure. And I think Mike has his hand raised now. Mike, can I pull this from the chat, or maybe, and then you can add to it if I don't catch it all. And that is not, has not been a topic of our conversation so far on Catholic social teaching.
Sure. Go ahead, Mike.
Mike, I'm going to unmute you. Hold on one second.
Actually, the last slide on social sin may have answered my question. I mean, Tom talks eloquently about the other three pillars: common good, the dignity of the human being, and solidarity. But I didn't hear a whole lot about subsidiarity, meaning, of course, that action needs to be taken at the lowest level possible.
Yes.
But I believe that with your slide on social sin, basically outlining the fact that we have no excuses for not taking action as an individual or a parish or a diocese, then I think maybe you have answered my question.
Okay, good. Well, Nick, am I coming through? I'm not on mute. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Mike. And I want to comment on it. I'll try not to comment on comments too much, because I hate that when people do that, but I'm going to do it anyway for this time around. But in the first of all, just realize that I am taking these principles. I'm sorry, let me back up. These principles do not cover every detail of Catholic social teaching, and the bishops, our bishops, who are the ones who basically wrote these principles, they would admit that. But what they would say is that all of the beliefs, all of the principles, the sub principles are captured in this, and I would agree with that. And in fact, on the belief creed that you have, hopefully that you have, the fourth one, excuse me, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the fifth belief actually covers that Catholic social teaching principle of subsidiarity, and it is exactly as Mike identified. And that belief says that full human dignity can only be fully experienced in community, that the family is the most basic unit of community, and that each person has a right to participate in decisions that affect their lives in the community. And that is the principle of that is an action of the principle of subsidiarity. And so I would say then, therefore, that these principles, while it does not say it explicitly, it is definitely embedded in there. So that's my response to that. Okay, other questions, please, or
Thanks,
comments?
I have Jennifer. I'm gonna allow you, Jennifer, to unmute.
Hi, sorry, I'm in a space where I can't have a camera on. So I know that this is a big statement or a big comment, and it's kind of a circular thinking. So I'm just going to put the comment out there because it certainly struck me hearing about the bishops and putting that out there, but moving away from just individual sin, but looking at it as these structures and having that very much built into social teaching and then our call to action. And so the struggle that I have, that many of us have, is, so I'm an individual within a church social structure in some ways that perpetuates that social sin. And maybe that's at the individual parish level, maybe it's at the individual diocesan level. And so I'm in that constant struggle with what is my individual responsibility, what is my interrelationship with my parish, with my diocese, with my fellow parishioners.
Yeah.
So I'm just struck by how that really hit me this time when I was thinking about how the bishops have laid out certain things that have made it difficult as an individual who follows the church to really fight against the social sins.
Yes, yes. Jennifer, thank you for that. And again, I'm sorry, I'm going to comment on that. A couple of comments that came to my mind. First of all, thank you for that. And by the way, I love your dinosaur there on the screen. I thought that was great. One of the things in response that comes to my mind is that it's interesting because when you sort through the different letters that our bishops, the U.S. bishops, have written, they in these principles, they will often say, and also, and I this is true in the document Communities of Salt and Light, I believe, which is written directly for us who are in parish-based social ministry. But the bishops say that they recognize that the institution of the church as an institution has sinful structures in it, and they say that the church needs to be exemplary in that. They also say the church as an institution is has and that has the human leadership in it, and not just leadership but fellowship. The church is made up of people who are flawed, And so it is natural that there would be structures that are sinful within the church itself. And I know you were saying something a little bit different than that, Jennifer, but I wanted to recognize that in the documents, the bishops do recognize that the church itself as an institution has elements of structures that are sinful, and that we are, and that the church is not exempt from the actions to reconcile those structures. The other thing that came to my mind, Jennifer, is that situation that you're describing, that you are in, I think a lot of us can identify with, and it is difficult. And when we get into the reconciliation, I will say, almost like a throwaway line, it is hard. Reconciling social sin is hard. That's one of the characteristics of social sin. It's very hard for various reasons that we're going to get to in just a couple seconds here. But it doesn't, and I don't know if this is comforting or not. I think maybe sometimes it is and sometimes it's not, but it doesn't exempt us from continuing to try to address the first and foremost, to raise the social sin, to do that in a loving way, but also a direct way. And then to try to work at trying to reconcile that social sin. But one of the characteristics of social sin and its reconciliation is that it takes lots of people and the power that lots of people bring to bear on a structure of sin. And so the first thing that we have to do, experiencing what you are describing, is get together with other people and try to create the kind of influence that's needed to deal with the reconciliation. And that's a hard process, but it is doable, and we're actually not exempt from it, as Mike just got finished pointing out to us. So anyway, that's my response to what you were saying, Jennifer.
We have time for one more question.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna allow Leo to unmute himself. He's also getting some chatter going in the chat. Leo?
Cool. Hi, Leo.
You should be able to unmute now if you try.
Yes,
There you go.
can you hear me?
Yes.
This is frustrating to me because this is so beautiful what the definition of social sin is, and the uncompromising demand that we deal with it. But it's also frustrating because I'm a lifelong Catholic, educated in Franciscan Jesuit universities, worked 25 years in Jesuit university, and the definition of social sin was never hung up on a wall in all of our offices. It was never
Yep.
repeatedly emphasized in homilies in the parishes I went to. How could that be when we have a Pope, 25, 30 years ago, telling us clearly what our responsibilities are, but no one was pounding the pulpit to say, now get out there and do that.
Yeah.
Do it.
Yeah, that is, I share your frustration. And I think that I don't have an answer to that question. I have a reflection on that question. And part of my reflection on the question is to go back to where I opened this session and shared with you the conversation that Nick and I had in terms of identifying this topic as a good topic to share, to have. And that is that after all these years, there's still skepticism about it. So it's not just within the pulpit where there's a lack of awareness, or perhaps deniability or fear, or a number of other emotions that that would keep people from, especially leaders, from coming forward and recognizing publicly and in proclamation form that social sin does exist, that our church teaches that social sin does exist, and that we all have a responsibility, just as we give food to people who are hungry, we are also responsible for reconciling, changing structures that are sinful, that do not, that are roadblocks to human dignity. So there are a number of, I think there are a number of factors that, interestingly, are beautifully covered in the definition of social sin, where the social sin definition is pretty short. And then it's got a whole list of things how you can't wiggle out of taking responsibility for it. And I think that the things that they name that are that allow us to not deal with it, that's evil. And we need to continue, those of us who are aware need to continue the hard work of reminding ourselves, our neighbors, our community, and our institutions that this exists. And those of us who are Catholic say directly that our church teaches this stuff. So you can't say any longer, I'm revealing my last slide, and that is you can't say any longer, you can't even ask, is this authentic teaching? It is authentic teaching. So anyway, that was a ramble, and I apologize for that. And I'm gonna leave it at that, Leo. So hang in there, my friend.
Well,
all right.
We are trying to hang in there in the face of parishioners who want to deny the realities of racism, and then now on top of this, we're going to tell them you're all complicit in it by being silent and not recognizing your contribution to social sin.
It's hard work.
It's a big hill to pull people up.
Yeah, yes, it's hard work. And actually, that Leo, thank you for that, because that's a good lead in to closing this, unfortunately closing the pause here and moving forward into the next section, which is around the question, how is social sin reconciled? And so we'll go to that. And I have found that one way to talk about the reconciliation of social sin is to talk about personal sin, and to ask ourselves, what is the process, or is there a process, and what is the process of reconciling personal sin? And I would say lots of Catholics and Christians can even instinctively identify a process for bringing the injury of a personal sin to grace through reconciliation, and they can identify the steps of a process. Well, the social sin is not different than that. Social sin, the reconciliation of social sin, of structures of sin, is also has a process. However, there are differences in the process of reconciling social sin, because of the characteristics of the sin itself. And some of the differences are, for example, that first of all, social sin has to do with community, has to do with large numbers of people. Personal sin has to do with injury to an individual. Another characteristic of social sin is that it is long-term in nature. It takes a long time for the social sin to be recognized as a sin, and it also takes a long time for the reconciliation to occur. And it's also social sin is also requires lots of people. There are very few people who have enough power to to change a sinful structure into a just structure. And just to be clear, when we're talking about, just as in the definition of social sin, to be very clear and to be more specific, when we're talking about a structure, we're talking about three big things. One is a law, another one is an institutional policy, and the third one is actually our social norms or our culture. Those are the three big structures that we're talking about. So that the sin is somehow a part of a law, somehow a part of a social, of an institutional policy, or sometimes are a part of our culture. And oftentimes the sin is in all three of those things. And because of that, it takes a lot of power, meaning to be able to get things done, to be able to change things. Power is not negative. Power is something that we need in order to bring about change in our lives, change in structures. And when we're talking about social sin, we're talking about things that require a lot of power. And very seldom does an individual have enough influence to actually change a sinful structure, a sinful law, or something like that. And it takes a lot of people to do that. And it takes a lot of people who are who have been organized with their resources, all moving in the same direction to generate enough power to actually reconcile that social sin. So going backwards then, social sin, the reconciliation of social sin does involve a process like personal sin, but it is different because of the characteristic of the sin itself. And there are 5 big main steps in the reconciliation of social sin process. And of course, each of these steps have a lot of subset steps as well. But the five main steps for reconciling social sin are: first step, and these are basically sequential. First is to shine a bright light on the social sin and to raise awareness and help us to recognize the fact that a social sin is in our midst. A structure of sin is in our midst. And the way that bright light gets shined on a social sin is primarily by listening to the stories of the people who are impacted most by the sinful structure. And the shining of the light is our way of generating a wide sense of injustice. And that then leads us into the second step, and that is, once we recognize that there is a social sin, to start researching and start conducting social analysis of that. And we need to determine, the process needs to determine who's doing what to whom and why, what unjust laws, institutional policies, and cultural norms are causing the structural sin, what the power dynamics are involved in keeping that structure in place, and also being clear about how this social sin and its reconciliation is connected to our faith, that our call to holiness energizes us to change this social this structure of sin into a just law, policy, or cultural practice. The third step is to get all those people involved, because we need those people, as I mentioned, we need lots of people and their resources organized, going in the same direction in order to change the sinful structure. And in this particular step, it is critical that the people who are most impacted by the sinful structure has a leading voice in how we want to change the structure, and also a part of and also a leading leading voice in what direction we head in. The next step is, I'm sorry, I have to look through my notes here because there's a box that keeps popping up that's in the way of the slide there. Okay, now I've got it. Here we go. So then the fourth step in reconciling social sins is to actually organize those people that we have recruited. And then the final step is to, in fact, enact, is to change the structure and to enact new laws or policies or social practices to enact social change. And so those are the steps of reconciliation, and the end point of that is the social change. When we get to the social change, and when we get to a structure, a law, a policy, or a practice that is now just, then we know that reconciliation of the social sin has happened. I hope that makes sense to you all, and that that it's clear that one, social sin and structures of sin can in fact and are in fact reconciled. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of effort, but when it happens, then the impact is great because it's going to impact communities and whole societies, and it's going to last. Hopefully, it'll last for a long time as well. So our faith and when that happens, our faith tells us that we are in fact in the presence of holiness, if that makes sense. Okay, so those being the steps for reconciling social sin and structures of sin, that brings us then to the final and concluding section of our journey here to answer that question. And I would offer the following concluding elements to this journey. And what we're going to do is circle back to the question, which is social change authentic and essential? Is it authentic teaching, and is it essential ministry? And the obvious answer to that, given what we have gone through, is yes, it is. It is authentic Catholic social teaching, and it is essential. We know that that there are three main functions of a community of faith, of a parish. One of those functions is to proclaim the good news. A second function, in order for the parish to actually be a parish, is to have a robust sacramental life and make sure the sacraments are available to the people of the community, especially Holy Eucharist. And the third essential part of a parish, of a faith community, is the practice of social ministry. And so therefore, the ministry of social change being a part of the full vision of parish-based social ministry that also includes formation and direct service, that means that it is essential. Social change is essential. And here's what when the person that in the session that I raised the question about, is this stuff authentic? What I say to people is that it is not only authentic and it is essential, but not only is it not only is it essential, but it is so essential that if we don't do it, chances are we're going to go to hell. And okay, I do say that. I don't exactly mean that, but you get the point that in fact it is so essential that it is a building block of our call to holiness. So that is the answer to the question based on what we have unlocked today. And I want to now circle back to the theme of racial justice and equity, and apply what we have been talking about. And the first thought I have is that clearly racism is a structure of sin. It is certainly a roadblock to full human dignity. Secondly, social change in the form of racially just laws, institutional policies, and cultural practices is how the reconciliation of social sin of racism occurs. And finally, racial justice and equity is the righteous and faith-filled response of individuals, families, and communities to our call to holiness. Therefore, what you all are studying is absolutely right in alignment with what we believe in our faith, and is right in alignment with our call to holiness. And I think with that, I am going to stop yammering, and I'm going to turn this over to Nick for any final thoughts and announcements or whatever else.
Tom, thank you for the time and thought and energy. I know you've been wrestling with the details of this presentation for some time, and I just am really grateful that you could spend that time and energy and share it with us today. And if you were able to open the chat and look, you would see nothing but gratitude from folks that are here. Maybe that's what's popping up and blocking your slides as you're trying.
If that's it, then keep doing it.
I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share just so you all have a chance to see each other. And I will follow up with Tom after our conversation. There is interest in getting copies of the slides. I do not know if that will be possible, but I can say that this is a recorded session. And so you'd be able to see the slides in that recording if nothing else. But we will follow up with folks in the materials. All of these different materials, many of the handouts were shared in advance, including the Catholic Social Teaching Creed, the Call to Holiness, the social sin definition. So much of that is already in the Google Drive, and people will be able to get their hands back on that going forward. So more to come on that end. I just want to encourage people. One of the blessings and graces of our Zoom lives that have existed these past months, perhaps more than we would want to, but it's that we have a library of content. And one of the great sources of faith justice content, including for parish justice leaders, is the Ignatian Family Teach-In for Justice. And so I just want to encourage people, if they don't already have access to that content, a bunch is already up online from the virtual teach-in that ISN hosted on October 16th. And we will often in this series refer to pieces of that recorded material and then build on it with a live, not in-person Zoom gathering. So I see Winnie Sullivan from College Parish in St. Louis. She's been part of one of those presentations in the past. Hi, Winnie. Thank you for being here. And others. So I really encourage people to check that out. And I'm sure ISN folks can drop that link in the chat. Our next parish racial justice session will take place in December. As I said, I think at the outset, we're still working on the content, but you can find information about that on ISN's Parish Racial Justice page, which has already been shared in the chat. I think that's where I'll end. Brenna, is there anything else on ISN's end that we should be thinking about?
I do have a kind of a vague invitation, which is just ISN has started partnering with Equal Exchange. And starting on November 1st, ethical purchasing it's all of these issues are interconnected. So we're going to be having a fundraiser with Equal Exchange where if you purchase anything using our code, ISN will receive kind of a 10% of the payment towards our programming. And it's just also a great way to promote a consistent ethic, obviously, of life and dignity of the human person and Catholic social teaching. So please look out for that. I know we send a lot of emails, but that'll be forthcoming.
Super. Thanks, Brenna. And thank you all for being with us again. Tom, thank you for guiding us and facilitating us so well today. It's not as fun as being in person, but it's a good second option.
Amen, brother. Thank you.
Okay. Take care, all. Thanks for your work and leadership. It's great to be with you. Peace.
Peace. Back.